A good Sunday morning to you, wherever you're watching us from. It is the 23rd day of August 2020. This is Kenya's premier Sunday morning political broadcast. This Sunday, we'll turn our cameras on the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, KEMSA, and the reported theft of public funds there in the middle of a global pandemic. The probe is running into strong political headwinds, raising eyebrows as to the truth of the matter. Will the truth come out anyway? In the meantime, the deadlock over the formula to share out revenue among the counties rages on. This past week, the Senate sought for an 8th time to find a winning formula, and for an 8th time, they failed. The government is accused of using strong-arm tactics rather than parliamentary lobbying to pass its bills following the dubious arrest of 3 senators going into Tuesday's crucial vote. And in real politics, we take a look at the Kamba nation and its political realities. The dominant political party there is the Wiper Party, and their party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and former Machakos Senator Johnson Muthama clashed publicly after Muthama proposed that Musyoka should be deputy president, William Ruto's running mate in 2022. We'll get the lowdown for you. As always, we trust that you keep your finger on the pulse of the nation. Stand by to call us with your analysis of the country's political situation at the tail end of the program. I am Ben Kitili. This is Inside Politics here on KTN News. Stand by for the next 120 minutes as we dissect the biggest political and policy issues in the Republic. Let's get right into it. Western Kenya leaders allied to Deputy President William Ruto have weighed in on the alleged misappropriation of Covid-19 funds at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, KEMSA. They called on the Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe to resign.
They are going to cut their funding kwa ile health sector ambayo wamekuwa wakifanya ujata hii yote. Kwa hivyo I still remain that Honorable CS Mutahi Kagwe, smell the coffee, swallow your pride and step aside.
Pesa milioni 11 yenye walitoa kwa county government ya Bungoma wakidai kwamba wanapeleka kufanya mambo ya kupigana na COVID na wakakawana kama njuku hapo town. Tunataka hiyo pesa wangamati ya shikwe ndio tuambie kweli.
Masaibu ambaye Mheshimiwa Uhuru anapitia sahihi. Kama angesikia wasia wetu, hatungekuwa mahali tupo wakati huu ambapo counties zinahitaji pesa na pesa haijafika hapa, ila sisi watu wa bunge la taifa tushapeana pesa ikuje, lakini kizungumkuti ni mtu anaitwa Raila Amolo.
Ile nafasi nafaa Musalia ni kuja pande hii ajiunga na naibu wa rais wafanye kazi pamoja. Huyu baba wetu Uhuru vile ameleta Raila ndani, ameingia ndani, amechokora hiyo nyumba ya baba wetu na mama wetu Ruto. Mpaka sasa Ruto anafukuzwa. Na sisi tunaambia Ruto, wewe ni mama wetu, sisi watoto wakubwa, hiyo nyumba hatutoki.
Meanwhile, the ODM party now says that only the Office of the Auditor General can verify corruption allegations at KEMSA. A party Secretary General Edwin Sifuna has said that some reports claiming theft of public funds at KEMSA are half-baked and sensational and cannot be relied upon. Listen.
This statute here, and it says the decision of the National Appeals
is a crucial amendment in order to clarify. You know,
after the 2015.
Began their retreat today, so I will very quickly invite the Okay. We have restrained ourselves from responding to these allegations because of our desire to comment from an informed position. We gather that the DCI has been called into KEMSA to investigate these matters. We, however, wonder how this can be so before a credible audit by the Auditor General is carried out to ascertain the veracity of some of these claims. Precedent has been set before where the media goes on a sensationalist extravaganza with half-baked information obtained from shadowy sources, ending up creating more problems than solutions. It is important to note that as far as the prices of PPEs and all the COVID-related supplies go, conventional wisdom must hold that such prices were lower before the COVID-19 ravaged the whole world, and that any procurement happening subsequent to that and in the current circumstances has to come at with higher values. It is only an audit that can ascertain the veracity of some.
Okay, let's get into the debate now. Let me introduce my panelists this morning. I have with me my colleague and senior reporter at The Standard, Rosalind Obala. I have with me a lawyer and political political strategist, Kipchumba Karori. Also with us on Inside Politics today is Mark Bichache, communication strategist, and also we have a new entrant on the show, Gloria Oroba, youth policy analyst. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. If I can begin with you, Rosalind, this issue is drawing so much political interest. Why is that?
Thank you so much, Ben. If you've been following the events that have happened in the last week, all these things started by a letter that was written by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to the ministry and the chair of the board, that is Kembi Gitsura, indicating that they were investigating KEMSA and they wanted some of the officers to step aside.
Right.
And if you followed, yes, the board sat, they had a special meeting, and in that special meeting, they decided to suspend the CEO and 2 top officials. So as we speak, this is an ongoing investigation. And we've also had the CS Health, Tai Kagwe, talking about that the health ministry is a cartel, the mafia house. And these are just some of the parastatals that are under this ministry. So I think it will be so unfair for politicians to already cast aspersions on these investigations, even as they talk about the Auditor General coming in to audit the books, because if EACC, which is an independent arm, is already seized on the matter, they will have just waited for EACC to complete and the other relevant agencies to also come out, because there's so many issues that have been branded. Politicians have been dragged in, senior government officials have been dragged in, and if you follow exactly what EACC indicated, there were the issues were about the tendering process. Was it followed? Remember, there was a time the independent oversight procurement authority had warned that during this COVID time, there is no institution that has been allowed to waiver the tendering process as by the procurement laws.
Right.
And they were told that even if it is to do the single sourcing, they were actually to follow due process. So if you follow what is going on, it's all about did they follow due process. So I think it is too early to talk about who and who, brand the names, because we've seen names being floated around, and we've seen even the media is being accused. But the media, it is the duty of the media to bring out what is happening. But I think this is just the initial process of the investigations.
Okay, let me bring in Kipchumba Karori. Kipchumba, if you can get me, give me your thoughts on why there is so much interest from both sides of the political divide, really. We have seen the DP's allies coming out to say they want this matter probed. They're very much interested in it. And we've seen ODM come out to defend some of the reports that have been coming out, even saying, even pointing an accusing finger at the DP himself, saying that people have been, saying that, asking is ODM, defending theft of public funds.
Thank you, Ben. I think why there is so much heat and debate around the issue of COVID funds is because, one, the public has not gotten the value for the money. We have spent so much money in terms of trying to alleviate Kenyans from getting the dire consequences or the shocks of COVID being here with us in terms of economically and even health-wise. But you realize that when you see what was happening and how the procurement was done, it leaves so much questions to be desired. And if there are so many other things that we need to ask ourselves as Kenyans, did Kenyans get value for their money? When we talk about the due process, was the due process followed? The other thing, did President Uhuru Kenyatta, first of all, start by gazetting COVID as a national disaster or a national pandemic? That is where we begin. If that was done, then we can go ahead and say the procurement was done under emergency. And if that was done, there are caps that cap how you do procurement. When you say you are procuring some certain services, there is a cap on how much you can make as terms of profit. But when you see some of these COVID cases, you realize that people make as much as even 300% profits. And we must also appreciate the aspect and the environment under which the KEMSA was operating, but that does not preclude them from the law. That when you do direct procurement, did they involve the Public Procurement Oversight Authority? Did they get the framework from them? Did they follow the stipulated law? Did they issue tenders to every Tom, Dick, and Harry outside there, or they issue tenders to those people who are pre-qualified in their system? And then finally, Ben, I think there is the Kenyan culture of fighting political corruption is a bad culture. You politicize corruption, and then you tribalize it, and then you kill the same thing. So at the end of the day, whatever is happening currently, political class is trying to use a brighter way of evading the issue of corruption in KEMSA. And the other thing is this: I think it is time now we ask the Global Fund and the USAID to make sure that the terms, there must be some certain terms they issue their money with, that those terms must be followed to the letter. And in terms of what my good senior Sifuna said yesterday, I think ODM was simply saying, if you are not eating with us, resign, because you cannot have a party of ODM's pedigree casting aspersions on even the investigative agencies, casting aspersion on everybody complaining about the war on COVID funds. We must have a concerted war on corruption, and it must be on law.
All right. Let me bring in Gloria. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. Give us your thoughts on what has been happening at KEMSA. Gloria, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm saying thank you for joining us. It's good to have you here. Give us your thoughts on what has been happening at KEMSA.
Well, for me, I know that people actually need to look at whether the Public Procurement Act was followed.
Right.
What we must start to realize is that you can follow the procedures to the letter. You can actually check all the boxes. But that doesn't mean that some of the procedures were not flawed, even if they checked all the boxes. Issues are being raised about the capacity of the organizations, of the companies that have been brought in as suppliers, whether they have the financial capability to deliver.
Right.
Some of them were like 30 days before that tender was actually given in. That is what is alleged. So there are some questions that you need to raise, even if the Public Procurement Act of 2015 was followed. Is this a procurement act that is actually set to benefit a few of the people within this country? Because the tenders were definitely not competitive, and if they were competitive amongst a certain few. Now, on the issue on politicizing this particular scandal, I don't think we can avoid to do that, because there are allegations that some of the senators of the committees were actually involved in this, in benefiting from these funds. So when you're looking at the corrupt people being some senators or being some member of parliament, then one way or another, politics must come into play. Now, in terms of what I'd like to highlight is, there's a reason why Kenyans are really pushing, and this thing is not dying. It's not dying with other stories. It's not being, it keeps recurring, because we are actually dealing with COVID-19 as we speak, and we're going to be dealing with it for the next 2 to 5 years. So lives have been affected. People have lost their jobs. The youth are out on the streets. Most of them are affected. Most of them are in the industries which have actually been affected highly, like the tourism industries, the waiters, the service provision industries. So a lot of youth are actually directly affected with this matter.
Right.
And for the opposition to come out and say that they cannot even comment based on insinuation or from not an informed position, I'm wondering whether that is how they have been dealing with other corruption cases. In the past, we have seen Raila Odinga coming out against so many scandals and really calling out on government. So I think for the opposition, they've just failed to act as opposition. And we all know it's because they are no longer opposition. Through the handshake, they're very confused. So even their statements are not making sense. It's very sad from me. I'm representing the youth to see Edwin Sifuna actually standing by some of the statements that he's taking out. So I think from a youth perspective, some of these youth leaders have really let us down during this whole issue, and we are actually looking to change them, and we hope that in the next few weeks we are going to see more and more leaders speaking out against corruption and speaking out against what is happening, because this lack of the ministry not actually helping Kenyans with the funds that they're getting from the global community, it's something to take lightly.
Given that background that you just shared and the political bickering and meddling, do you think the truth will come out?
I think Kenyans already know the truth, and maybe what we are lacking is someone to hold these people accountable. We already know that the funds have been stolen. There are some names that have been mentioned that possibly could be definitely involved. So what we are trying to say is, even if they don't bring these people to justice, we are actually. I want people to understand that these are not things we'll forget. It's not one of those shelf somewhere. These are things that we are the energy that we are using right now, that anger, we are going to channel it towards electing the proper leaders come 2022.
All right. Let me finally bring in Mark Bichache. Mark, welcome back to the show. We are seeing members or political leaders in government calling out, calling for the resignation of a cabinet secretary, and we're seeing political leaders who are in the minority, who are supposed to be checking the executive, seemingly defending what has been happening. What's your take?
Ben, I have taken the time to be appraised of the facts, and I honestly wish that our dear co-panelist Roslina Bala is the one who had come up with this particular expose, because that expose has some serious glaring holes, and that's why I believe that it is more political and will actually cost the fight against corruption more than it will help the fight against corruption. Here's what I mean, and I'll give you a basic example. Let's start here. When we say 43 billion is missing from KEMSA, and the Ministry of Health has a total budget this year of 110 million. You want to tell me it puts about 40% of its budget into KEMSA? And then when you put 40% of your budget into KEMSA, all of it goes into procurement? That's unbelievable. It's simply not possible. And that's where the problem is. Ben, the problem here is not that there is no corruption in KEMSA. I can tell you for free, there is corruption in KEMSA. But if you want to win the fight against corruption and make sure you run scot-free, is you muddy the waters. You get in there like a pig and you make everything as dirty as possible. Let's start here. If you look at the actions of CS Mutahi Kagwe since he came into office, why are people asking him to do more or to even resign? Yet he is the one who reported this issue to DCI and EACC. Why do you want to say that the CS is not doing any work while he's on record? When he made changes on KEMRI, it is the same people on Twitter who began to say that people should stay in place. When he transferred people from the Ministry of Health and they refused to go. So obviously this is an issue where there are three different interest groups. There is the common citizen who's interested in the justice and receiving the goods and services he was promised by the Ministry of Health. But there's another group, the group who had initially started the corrupt tenders within KEMSA. Deals which were cancelled, by the way, check the records. And those people whose deals were cancelled are the same people who want to muddy the waters, because if you go back historically, they are guilty for having a lot of corruption within KEMSA. But thirdly, you've got the political class who is hell-bent on making sure that the Uhuru regime and people who seem to support Uhuru come out in the worst light possible. It is therefore critical for them to throw stones at any CS who seems to be doing the right thing. Now, for them, it is not about the fight of corruption or winning against the fight of corruption. It is to make sure the president seems as stained as possible. And those are the three lines we are looking
at. All
at.
right.
But what
so across those lines, Mark, so yes. What is the way forward? What is more important from where you sit?
What is more important and what is critical is we must begin to learn to follow process, okay? We must begin to understand that it is not logical for you to come and say 43 billion has been stolen and be unable to substantiate it and stoke the emotions of the public beyond the reasonable level. Because what will happen is when someone is finally arrested for a 200 million shillings bad deal, Kenyans will still feel like justice has not been done because in their minds, they will still think it is 43 billion. And that's where the danger is. What we need to go back to is we've got three institutions that are actively participating in this investigation under the blessing of the president and the CS. Who are those institutions? Number one, you've got the Auditor General. Number two, you've got DCI, you've got EACC. None of us has the capacity to do what they can do. And they have proven that they are very much able to unravel these mysteries. So the sensationalization of this particular issue is what I have a problem with. There's corruption in KEMSA, but it's not 3 billion shillings, and not everything has been stolen.
All right, a lot to say about that. Investigations continue into this matter. The CEO, the commercial director, and the procurement manager remain suspended. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. When we come back, we shall be taking a look at the deadlock over the revenue sharing formula by the Senate. We'll take a look at what has been happening this past week as that consensus remains elusive.